Well, today I'm joined by Nadine Montgomery Allam. Nadine, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much. Absolutely delighted that you are joining us on Hey Legal. Inspiring, courageous, tremendous story that we're going to run through just now. The title that we have for today's talk is From the Supreme Court to a Career in Law. So that in itself is intriguing. You've just started a traineeship, so congratulations on that. How are you getting on with that?
I'm loving it. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. So, as a starting point, let's take it that our viewers, listeners don't know any of the background. Could you just explain your path into studying law and to becoming a lawyer, please?
Oh, no problem. Well, thank you for that lovely introduction. That was very kind. My path into law is quite unique, I think, and it's different to most people in that it stemmed from my own personal tragedy. Way back in 1999, I'm showing my age here, my son was born with cerebral palsy following quite a traumatic delivery. And, at that time, way back then, I wanted to know what had happened, what had went wrong. And I looked into that and I discovered that one of the main failures in my care was that the lack of informed consent, or as I prefer to call it, valid consent, patient consent. The risks weren't explained to me, and he was delivered myself, I have type 1 diabetes, so it was a very large baby, and he was delivered what they call normally, vaginally, and instead of offering a cesarean section. And, the choice was taken away from me. So without wanting to frighten any people listening, his birth was traumatic. He was deprived of oxygen for 12 minutes, and he was born stillborn by the time, he was delivered. And as I say afterwards, I wanted to know why this had happened, and I wanted to make sure that it didn't happen to anyone ever again. And that's when we researched, myself and my family, who were all doctors. I was very fortunate. They had that educational background, and we were able to uncover the law surrounding informed consent, valid consent, and we realised that it was substandard in my case. As I say, the risks hadn't been discussed with me prior to agreeing to a trial of forceps. So I went to see a solicitor way back in 1999. The case took 15 years from initial naming and blaming to final resolution at the Supreme Court in 2015. We failed at both the Scottish courts. We failed at the Outer House and we failed at the Inner House. I don't know how much detail you want about that, but I'm more than happy to discuss that. But in 2014, we went to the Supreme Court. The decision was delivered in 2015, and they assembled a full bench of Supreme Court judges. And also the GMC appeared at the appeal, and they intervened. And they emphasised, again, the good clinical practice from that era of consent, patients and doctors making their decisions together. So in 2015, all 7 judges unanimously agreed, and the ethical guidance that was actually already essential for doctors through the GMC was passed into law. And throughout that time, I was reading about law, but I didn't really understand it. I realised as a pursuer in a case that there's lots of legal hurdles you have to jump through. And I think as a layperson, you don't understand that. You think something really awful happened to you and you want to go to the court and you want to say to the sheriff, this happened to me and this was wrong. And the sheriff reads it and goes, oh yes, that was terribly wrong. Okay, there's your justice, whatever that may be. And the reality is that's not the case. There are so many legal hurdles we had to jump through, causation and Bolam and Hunter and Hanley and Belitho and all these, out of date to me tests. So during that time, I became very interested in the law, but it was just reading and absorbing. It wasn't really until Sam went to university. So Sam's now 23, but he went to Strathclyde University, and my life was basically up until then caring for Sam, doing everything for Sam, because he has cerebral palsy and he was born with a left Erb's palsy as well. And when I took him to his first day at university, we went to meet with the disabled officers there, and they have a service where they look after people that have extra additional needs so that they can enjoy their university life too. And when I took him for this appointment, I was really anxious. This is a big step. He's going to university. He needs so many things. So I went with a paper and pen, and I thought, okay, this is what he needs. He needs, someone needs to take him to class, and he can't do up his, zip, and he can't tie his rucksack, and how will he carry his papers? And the disability services gentleman just laughed at me, and he said, "Mum, we don't need you here." And I said, "What do you mean we don't need, who's going to help him?" And he said, "We're going to help him. We're provide one-to-one care for him." And so I asked, well, when do I bring him in? Like, what time? And I need to know his timetable. I need to get him from A to B. And they said, "You just go home, Mum. We don't need you. We're going to provide transport." And I was so amazed at how fantastic they were. And this was at University of Strathclyde. They provided so much care for him. So I went home that day not knowing for the next 5 years what I was going to do with my life. And for the first time, I thought, I wonder if I could go back to university and study. And obviously one of the areas that I was interested in was law. So because I had already done a degree, a science degree, I was able to do the accelerated law degree, which was only 2 years. And I actually ended up at Strathclyde University where Sam was, much to his absolute horror, because if I bumped into him, I had to pretend I was his big sister. It's far too embarrassing to have your mum at the same university. So that's actually, it's quite an unusual story how I went on to do law.
Well, that's amazing. It's fantastic to hear about the support, obviously, as well, and congratulations to you and Sam in relation to everything you've just outlined here. But it's great to hear that the support for Sam, to the extent that there is, and also that it's then giving you the opportunity to then pursue a law degree, which is brilliant. So I wonder if we could just take it back a little bit. When you were going through the legal process, the client, and having these, I'm going to call them setbacks, they're more than setbacks for you, but losing at various different points. How did that feel for you? How did you cope with the time in between the different hearings, and how did you navigate that emotionally, really?
I think as a pursuer, it's probably one of the most stressful things you can go through is the proof, the initial proof. I think our initial proof, I can't remember how many weeks it was. And I want to say between 4 and 6. I may be wrong. It was a long time ago now. It seemed to go on and on and on. But you have to really relive what you went through. And in some ways, my way of dealing with things was to almost put it in a box, what happened to me, and never spoke about it. It was something tragic that happened, and that was it. But to have to go to court and relive all the fine details, and it's intimidating, because in the Court of Session in Edinburgh, it's very theatrical. There's a lot of wigs, there's a lot of gowns, and as a lay person walking into that kind of room, it's terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And so formal, Mrs. Montgomery, and they wanted to talk about what's my cervix and things, and you're mortified at the same time. And then in the other side of things, you've got a medical professional who I have the utmost respect for. As I said, my mother was a GP, my father was a hospital consultant, my sister, is now a consultant in anaesthetics. To see a doctor having to give evidence and defend herself was heartbreaking too. This wasn't a personal attack against her. It was, that there was a flaw in the system, and I wanted that to come through and for things to change. And for, never in our wildest dreams did we think we would change the law. But, we had in our mind that there was a flaw here. So emotionally, it's probably the most horrendous thing you can go through. And I would say for any kind of person wanting to come, to go through this system, it would be great if they have like a lot of support, and legal teams can provide a lot of support. For me, my legal team were brilliant at explaining the process, what was going to happen, and talking me through things, and that's really, really beneficial to my understanding. But I guess each pursuer will be different with what they want to know, how much information they can take on board. But it really helped me to understand the process, so I wasn't as frightened or scared, or I knew what to expect. And that's and I can't emphasize enough as well the importance of a good legal team, people that are passionate about what they say. And we were very fortunate. We had an excellent legal team. Our counsel was absolutely outstanding, Lauren Sutherland QC, who was more passionate about consent than I was, if that's possible. But yes, she was. And And not only that, she was dedicated to ensuring patients received their justice, and children that were left with damages, like my son Sam, were fully compensated and can lead their life to their full potential, whatever that may be. So I can't emphasize enough the importance of a good legal team.
Yeah, having lawyers on your side, counsel on your side who are passionate, dedicated, focused on the outcomes, trying to do the very best they can, take you through the system, absolutely crucially important. And it sounds as though you've had fantastic representation there. And representation in so many levels. You'll need advice about the law, but you just need guided through it as well as your person. When did talk turn to going to the Supreme Court, and how did you feel about that?
I remember I never knew there was an option in those days to go to the Supreme Court. I remember when we were going to appeal to the Inner House, thinking that was the last sort of port of call. And then when the decision came from the Inner House and they basically upheld everything Lord Ordinary said in his decision, I think it was in 2009, that was like utterly heartbreaking. And I remember saying to my sister, I was invited to go through to council in Edinburgh and I didn't want to go. And I remember saying I can't go because I was so distraught. And but I wanted to go and thank them obviously for what they had done and how much everyone had the amount of work everyone had put in for this one child. And so I mustered all the strength I could, and I think actually she came with me and we went through to Edinburgh solely in my mind just to thank them for everything they'd done. And when we got there, they were all talking and their files out and they were like whispering and then they said to me, well, what we're going to do now is we're going to appeal to the Supreme Court. And it was like a gut-wrenching moment because is that a thing? What does that mean? You can go to the Supreme Court. There's another court. Oh my God, do we have a chance still? So it was like amazing to know that we had this chance, but more amazing for me to know that people were listening to the point that I was trying to make, that patients have a right to decide their own future. Every patient comes with their own unique set of circumstances, whatever that may be, and they have a right to decide. They have the right to self-determination and respect for their autonomy. And I was loving that somebody would even just listen to that argument, even if they didn't agree with me, just listen to it. And that, I think that was enough to, keep me motivated and keep me going.
Yeah. And it was ultimately in 2015 that the decision was released. What was it like, again, from your perspective, being at the Supreme Court or being part of those proceedings?
It was very different to the Scottish courts. It was a lot more informal. The justices there just wear normal clothes. There's no wigs, there's no gowns. And it was a 2-day hearing. And I was delighted when I knew that the GMC were, intervening, because what they were saying essentially was what we were, arguing. And what they were saying was essentially the guidelines that were in place already since way back in 1999 when Sam was born. And this was now fast forward 2014. So I think one of the things that I never understood as well is that, GMC guidelines in those times said, and still do, patients and doctors should be making decisions together. They should be discussing their risks and options and benefits. And then you had that on the one hand, but then on the other hand, you had the law, and the law said, Bolam, Hunter and Hanley, well, if you can find one doctor that doesn't adhere to these good clinical guidelines, if you could find another one that's the same, that would back you up, then that doctor was going to escape liability. And that was like a complete conundrum for me, because you had two separate things. The law and the GMC were at complete odds with each other. So when they intervened, this was great. For me, obviously, it was fantastic. And I had a good feeling at the Supreme Court. I really did. Again, as I said, that people were listening to me, if not agreeing with me. I don't know. They kept their cards close to their chest. But it was lovely to see Lady Hale, because we had a female on the bench as well. Because I felt what happened to me, as a female, it was really important to have a female representation as well, and think how that would have affected me. So when the decision came in 2015, I didn't really have any idea. And my solicitor phoned me while I was driving, and he said, can you pull over? And I remember thinking, oh, this was a year later, this must be it, and this is really bad, and he's asked me to pull over. And he said, I just want to let you know that all 7 judges unanimously agreed. And it's just unbelievable. And I don't think it sunk in at all. And I remember the first thing I did was phone my sister, and she was in theatre. I was like, you need to get her out of theatre. I need to tell her something. I was just so excited. Just the opportunities it's afforded me. And he didn't win anything. He was compensated for what happened to him. I hate when I read in headlines, oh, child won, such and such in damages. He was compensated for it. But what that meant for him is he could have so many things in life that perhaps we could never afford or be able to provide for him, so that he could reach his full potential. And, in effect, it allowed me to go to university to have a career myself, because he would never have got to university if we hadn't looked after his schooling and his physiotherapy and all these things growing up. So, we feel very, very, very blessed.
It's actually making the hairs on the back of my neck stand up there as you were telling me about your success. I can only imagine that moment where you hear, after all of those years and all of that legal fight and all of the emotions and tears and all of that, that this, especially a unanimous ruling in your favour, is quite incredible. And
I don't think you appreciate that, do you, until you study law? When you realise that a unanimous decision is completely unheard of. There's always some random dissent, isn't there?
Always a dissent. So, no, that's amazing. And yes, I mean, obviously so much has flowed from your success there. Have practices changed then, from your perspective, in relation to consent, following upon your own landmark case?
I think to a certain extent, and this is purely my perception and what I've observed over the years, is that certain specialities in medicine deal with consents so well. Like, for example, anaesthetics, I would say that they lead the way, and they've been practicing using good consent for many, many years. And I think it's all to do with their training, but there's other specialities that don't. And I hate to say obstetrics and gynecology is, in my opinion, one of them. And we need to work with these people, especially in maternity services. There's a lot of focus on normal birth, as they call it, physiological birth, that you're a better woman if that's what you do, and not to offer a caesarean section to someone. And even way back in the 50s, in the 80s, sorry, in the decision in Sidaway, Lord Scarman was talking about that, and he said, patients come with their own unique set of circumstances, and what's important to them might not even be medical. It might be something else. It might be that you've got childcare options, or that you're really frightened about something, and that you should be allowed to make that in your decision. And I'd like that to be reflected in maternity services. If a patient wants to have a caesarean section for whatever reason, or wants to go down to the river and give birth naturally, whatever floats their boat, the point is they should be provided with all the options. The risks of these options should be discussed, and the benefits, and that patient should make their decision on their own with the support of their doctor. It should really be supported decision making now, not shared decision making, putting the patient firmly in the centre of the decision making process now. But I think that's lacking in, unfortunately, obstetrics and gynecology still.
Yeah,
we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I'm sure there's been progress, but like with everything, there's probably a lot of room for improvement. So I wonder, what was it like for you then, just starting to study law?
It was a bit like I was riding a bike, but the bike was on fire. I can only explain it as it was complete mayhem. It was a lot of hard work, and I think as well it was a lot of hard work for me because I knew that I wasn't interested in other aspects of the law. I didn't care about property law, conveyancing. I didn't care about commercial and contracts. But you have to obviously study that in order to get to where I wanted to go. So I just had to get back into the study mindset and just go on with it. And it was like really intensive. But thankfully at that stage, Sam was at university. So he was cared for during the hours when I was at university. And quite often we would come back together if necessary, or I'd bump into him in the library. But it was hard work, but it was worth absolutely, the best thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah. What classes did you like other than
I really enjoyed delict, and when I went on to do my postgrad, I tutored in delict and at Strathclyde University. Absolutely loved teaching the undergrads. And what else did I like? I'm going to have to say that might have been it. Public law was interesting, I think, because you know, it's current, and you know, especially with Brexit and possibly Scottish independence or not Scottish independence, so it's very topical. So public law was interesting, but that's it.
Yeah,
I just wanted to be on medical law.
Yeah, you've just got to get through the other classes and just get to the end of it, and then get the chance to specialise. One of the questions I'd want to ask you was about, you know, you're now starting a legal career. You've bringing a almost unique perspective to that career, and you're now going to be representing, or are representing, people and taking them through this process. Is there anything that occurs to you now about what could be done in terms of making access to justice more accessible for people, more inclusive? Because I think this is a challenge that the legal system's currently starting to wrestle with, but really has an awful lot of work to do. When you say access to justice, what are you meaning? Just going through the legal process, trying to achieve outcomes, whether that's success or failure, but just, you know, you've had the experience of years of being in a courtroom, being represented. You talked about taking part in the hearings, but your own personal you know, circumstances being openly discussed. Is there anything that springs to mind as you start to become involved in hearings like that you think could be improved? Because many lawyers who stand up to represent people haven't been in the situation that you've been in, and maybe don't see it from that perspective. Well, some of the hurdles I see, for example, the lengthy litigation process, that is such a huge hurdle, is how long it takes for everything to. In my day also, legal aid was available. I'm not sure what the situation is now, but in terms of legal aid, how important that is, because the nature of these litigation claims is, you know, they're insurmountable and they're so time consuming. I would like for pursuers to be almost find a way to almost be compensated, admit liability if there's something that's gone wrong early, to allow these children, and they're going to grow up into adults, to have whatever they need at that time. One of the things that for me, you know, I was fortunate in that I came from a family that were able to help out when Sam needed things such as physiotherapy, or a lot of families aren't. And it makes me wonder, during that crucial time when the child is developing, and I'm purely talking about birth injuries, obviously, how much input they need at that stage, and that input has to be available for them so that they can reach their full potential when they're older. So it would be good if there's, you know, provisions, and it would be good if we can shorten the litigation length. It's ridiculous. I mean, it took me 15 years. 15 years is a very long time. Absolutely. Yeah. But that 15 years is such an incredible amount of time. It does end up being a landmark case, obviously, but still, 15 years seems tremendously long. The change will come about through people like yourself. That's already happened in relation to your own case, but also within the profession too. So you're now at the start line in terms of making being involved in cases and advocating for change. I've no doubt that's exactly what you're going to do. So you've obviously chosen to work in the field of medical negligence. It was the only area, I'm sure, as you've said, it was of interest. But generally, what do you hope to achieve in your legal career? Well, I ended up working. I work now in just now. My traineeship is with L&M MediLaw, and I actually came here because one of the people that works here, one of the senior solicitors, Elizabeth Rose, I had seen her in court, and I had observed, done some work experience at a proof that she had been at, and I could see the passion from her. And I remember thinking, you know, I had so many amazing female legal role models throughout my journey, and obviously I sent my CV to her once that I had qualified, because not only is she, for example, an exceptional lawyer,
But, you know, we have like an understanding and an empathy that I don't think many people can provide. I think I'm going to provide a unique perspective in that I care so much about receiving justice and receiving compensation for what happened to you. And it's not, again, it's not about money and winning something. It's about providing help and support so that the child or the patient, the adult can, you know, do all the things that they hope to do. And I just want to help people. I think that's why I ended up here, because I want to, not for people to suffer like what I went through, but to know that there are people that care. We're not just lawyers that we're here to, you know, whatever, tell you what's happening. And no, we're here because we care and we want to help. And I would hope that people would know with my journey, they can ask any questions. I can talk them through the process. This is what's going to happen, and this is what this means. And I know you'll be feeling X, Y, or Z because I too have been there. I think that's quite unique, and I hope that it's helpful.
Oh, I'm sure it will be. And how are you enjoying being part of a very busy legal practice?
It's completely mental. I don't know how else to describe it. It's insane. It's so enjoyable. I'm getting to learn a lot from my colleague Elizabeth in terms of medical negligence and the process, from all the little things to, you know, we have a proof in a couple of weeks' time. So being on the other end is completely different, but it's thoroughly enjoyable. It's hard work, but it's work that I enjoy.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure your days and your weeks and your months will be very busy, and that means the time will fly past, and before you know it, you'll be fully qualified and into your career, and then all sorts of incredible achievements lie ahead. I've got absolutely no doubt about that, which is brilliant.
Oh, thank you.
Well, no, congratulations and everything you've told us about today. Can I just ask, how is Sam doing now? So he will have graduated.
Yeah, he graduated June this year. So he's got his software engineering degree. I'm so proud of him. It's fantastic because I look at him now and I think, you know, when you were born, they told me you wouldn't walk or you wouldn't talk, and he just does everything. So again, another note for parents that may be in a similar position is just don't lose hope. There's so many wonderful things that, you know, happen as they get older. So he's graduated and he's now looking for a job. So life goes on.
Life goes on. Well, fantastic. Nadine, thank you so much. I know you've already outlined that you have tremendously busy days, and I've taken up your time right in the middle of one of them to ask you all about this. So you've been so kind with your time. I think you're I'm calling it a story. I don't know the best way to describe it. Your life, the experience you've had has been inspirational. Genuinely mean that. And I'm sure I can't speak for the legal sector, but I'm sure they'll be absolutely delighted to hear more about the fact that you've decided to join the profession and, you know, to take up the challenge of representing people who need passionate legal advice. And I look forward to hearing about your achievements going forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.